Pokemon has been a huge part of gaming for over 25 years and is still going strong, keeping players hooked with its mix of cute creatures and strategic battles. While the main goal of becoming a Pokemon master has always been the same, each new generation shakes things up with fresh gimmicks and battle facilities that change how we play the game. From held items to terrestrialization, these mechanics might seem like fun little addition, but they've all had a huge impact on the series. Join me as I explore every Pokemon generation and challenge myself to identify how each gimmick has reshaped the game. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? With Generation 1 and the games that started it all. Back in 1996, Pokemon Red and Blue, or Green if you were in Japan, hit the shelves and introduced us to the world of Pokemon. These games were revolutionary for their time, creating a brand new genre that mixed RPG elements with monster collecting. The original 151 Pokemon became iconic, and types like fire, water, and grass laid the foundation for the strategic battles we've come to love. In terms of mechanics, things were pretty straightforward. You caught Pokemon, battled with them, and took on the 8 gyms before challenging the Elite Four and destroying the champion yourself. But even in these early days, there were hints of the complexity that will come in future generations. Status conditions, critical hits, and even the basic type matchup were all part of the formula. Everything was simple, basic, and a bit janky of course, but it filled me with absolute curiosity as I traversed the world of Kanto, going from Pewter City all the way to Seafoam Islands, catching legendaries and fighting cool items in all sorts of hidden locations. Shortly after the release of Gen 1, Generation 2 was released with Gold, Silver, and Crystal. These games built on the foundation laid by Gen 1 and introduced a ton of new features that have since become staples in the series. One of the biggest changes was the addition of 2 new types, Dark and Steel. These were added to balance out the overpowered Psychic type from Gen 1 and to create new strategic possibilities. But Generation 2 didn't just stop there. It also brought in the day and night cycle, causing Pokemon to now appear at different times of day, with Pokemon like Hoot being asleep if you encountered it in the day. This cycle also influenced in-game events like bug catching events and even the evolution of certain Pokemon. And let's not forget about breeding as well. This was the first time you could breed Pokemon to get eggs, opening up a whole new world of possibilities for competitive players and collectors alike. Breeding allowed players to pass on moves, abilities, and even stats, leading to a whole new level of customization and optimization for your Pokemon team. On top of that, if you were a shiny hunter at one point in time and you were playing Generation 2, it was the best way for you to hunt for shinies. Another game-changing feature introduced in Generation 2 was items. Now you might be saying, Mocha, come on, are you stupid? Generation 1 already had items. Generation 2 expanded this concept dramatically by introducing held items. These were items that Pokemon could hold during battles, providing passive effects that could turn the tide of the battle. Some of the earliest held items included Prescue Berry, which cured paralysis, and Bitter Berry. Okay, that's kinda just Bitter Berry, which cured confusion. These items added a new layer of strategy as you could now prepare for specific threats by equipping your Pokemon with items that mitigated status effects or boosted certain stats. However, these 2 particularly unique items introduced in Generation 2 never made it out of this generation. The Berserk Gene was a unique item that, when held by a Pokemon, would automatically boost its attack stat by 2 stages, but would also confuse the Pokemon for 256 turns. Yes, that's right, 256 turns, and no, you can't just heal off the status with a Bitter Berry or switch it out. The Pokemon remains confused. Brick Piece was, on the other hand, an absolutely broken item. It was a rare chunk of brick. That's it. It seems to have been included as part of some feature or event that was never fully realized or implemented outside of Gen 2. When it comes to battle facilities, Generation 2 gave us the very first one, the Battle Tower in Crystal. It was a relatively simple setup compared to what we have now, but it was the first time players could engage in a series of battles against increasingly tough opponents. It wasn't as feature-rich as the battle facilities that will come later, but it was a significant step forward in providing post-game content that went beyond just catching and training Pokemon. Generation 2 took the simple yet addictive formula of Red and Blue and added layers and layers of depth, making it a richer experience for both casual and competitive players alike. If there's one gimmick that truly defined Gen 3, it's the introduction of abilities and natures. These two mechanics weren't just little tweaks, they completely changed how you approach battles and how you build your team. Every Pokemon got its own unique ability in Generation 3, which was a game changer by the way. Powerful abilities like Intimidate, Levitate, Arena Trap, Illuminate, powerful abilities. They weren't just there for show, they affected how you battle and how you strategize. For example, Gyarados' ability Intimidate lowers the opponent's attack when it enters the battle. Suddenly, Gyarados wasn't just a hard-hitting water type, it could also play a defensive role by weakening physical attackers. Natures took the customization even further by affecting a Pokemon's stats. A modest nature boosts special attack but lowers attack, which means it's really perfect for special attackers like Alakazam. Meanwhile, a jolly nature boosts speed and the cost of special attack, making it ideal for physical sweepers like Salamence. This system added another layer to team building, especially for players who wanted to maximize their Pokemon's potential in battles. These features became a standard part of the series, and today competitive players wouldn't even think of a world without them. Double battles were officially introduced in Generation 3, and this added a whole new layer of strategy to Pokemon. Instead of just sending out one Pokemon at a time, now you had two on the field, which meant managing multiple types, abilities, and moves simultaneously. Generation 3 integrated this new format directly into the main storyline, introducing players to mechanics through battles with gym leaders and important NPCs. Kate and Liza, the Psychic-type gym leader in the Mossdeep City Gym, were the first gym leaders to specifically use a double battle format in an important battle. Their strategies relied heavily on teamwork between Pokemon, teaching players early on that double battles weren't just about brute force, but about coordination. Alongside double battles for the first time, players could engage in tag battles alongside NPCs. One notable example in Pokemon Emerald was when you teamed up with Steven, the champion, to take on Team Magma in the Mossdeep Space Center. These double battles helped immerse players in the new battle style and showed that it wasn't just an extra mode, it was a core part of the gameplay. The introduction of double battles became more than just a gimmick in the in-game story. It evolved into a fundamental part of Pokemon's competitive scene. Starting in Generation 3, double battles became the official format for Pokemon Video Game Championships, also known as the VGCs, and they've remained the primary competitive format to this day. Some moves become far more useful in the context of double battles. For instance, moves like Earthquake would now hit every Pokemon on the field, including your partner, unless they had an immunity like flying types or Pokemon with the Levitate ability, while other moves that were seen as less valuable in singles were crucially important in double battles. Helping Hand, for example, boosts the power of your partner's move, became a critical tool in double battle strategies and is a fundamentally important move for VGC teams even today. Double battles weren't just a gimmick for Generation 3, they ended up defining the future of Pokemon competitive scene, and they are still a go-to format for official tournaments today. While Ruby and Sapphire introduced some great new features, it wasn't until Pokemon Emerald came along that we got one of the most iconic battle facilities of all time, the Battle Frontier. This place was a Pokemon player's dream and nightmare to some, offering a level of challenge that wasn't seen in the main game. The Frontier facilities wasn't just one battle tower, it was 7 distinct facilities, each with its own twist on battling. You've got the Battle Tower, which is the standard. You've got Battle Dome, which is a tournament-style facility where you had to think ahead and plan for the next round. You've got Battle Factory, Battle Palace, Battle Pyramid, Battle Arena, and Battle Pike. The variety and difficulty of these facilities kept players coming back for more, offering a different kind of post-game challenge that went far beyond beating the Elite Four. The concept of different battle formats was so popular that future games will continue to revisit this idea. Right, Game Freak? Right? Not everything in Gen 3, however, was about battles. Cool standout gimmicks that added more fun to the world of Pokemon were Pokemon contests and secret base. Pokemon contests weren't just about strength, but style. Your Pokemon would compete in categories like coolness, cuteness, smarts, or beauty. You had to appeal to judges using moves that worked best in each category and feeding your Pokemon Pokeblocks to boost their contest stats. This in turn gave us the weirdest and most obnoxious way to evolve your Pokemon, which is to maximize the beauty stat of Feebas in order for it to evolve into Milotic. It was cool at the time, but it was really annoying in hindsight. Pokemon Contest was a nice break from the usual battles and allowed for a different kind of progression with your Pokemon. It gave you nice and cute ribbons. Secret bases were essentially customizable hideouts. You could find a spot in the overworld with these indentations, set up your base, and decorate it with items you collected throughout the game. What made them really cool was that you could link up with friends and visit each other's bases, making it feel like you were a part of a larger community. In later games, secret bases evolved into more multiplayer-focused features, but the seeds were planted in Gen 3. Well, I really just do miss Gen 3. Generation 4 marked by Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, also known as DBP, as well as the remakes Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which is dubbed as HGSS, not only introduced new battle mechanics and features, but also modernized how players interacted with each other. One of the most impactful change in Pokemon history happened in Generation 4 with the physical special split. Before this, whether a move was physical or special depended solely on its type. How we used to remember which type was physical and which type was special was to remember that every type that had an evolution and dragon type were special. Anything else? Physical. Let me give you an example. All electric type moves were special because Jolteon is an evolution and is an electric type, while all fighting type moves were physical because there's no fighting type evolution, therefore it is physical. This meant that a move like Thunder Punch, an electric type move, was special in Generation 3, but in Generation 4 it is now physical, while Thunderbolt, which is also an electric type move, remains special. Finally, Pokemon could fully utilize their move pool to their potential. Let's use Gyarados as an example again. Its only physical stat move in Generation 3 was Hidden Power Flying. It couldn't even use its water type moves because they were all special. Remember, water evolution is Vaporeon and thus water was special. But with the split, Waterfall became a physical move, making Gyarados a real powerhouse. This change brought strategy to a whole new level. Suddenly moves like Leaf Blade, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, the Elemental Punch basically, became much more useful for physical attackers, and Pokemon that were previously underwhelming due to their moveset limitations gained newfound potential. In short, this mechanic made battling a lot more interesting and competitive. Before Generation 4, multiplayer Pokemon battles and trading were mostly limited to linking up with friends using cables or the subscribe button. But Generation 4 brought the global trade station and online battles through Nintendo Wi-Fi, and this was a huge step forward for the franchise. With the GTS, you could trade with trainers from around the world. All you had to do was put up a Pokemon for trade and specify what you wanted in return, and other players could find your offer. It wasn't perfect, of course. A lot of players would request something impossible like a level 1 Regigigas or a level 1 Dialga, but it was still revolutionary for its time, allowing players to connect like never before. Before this, battling was mostly a local affair or via net battle. God, I'm old. But now, you could connect and test your skills against players globally. This set the stage for what would later become more streamlined and competitive formats, making Pokemon feel like a true worldwide phenomenon. It was an exciting moment to realize that you no longer needed real-life friends for battles anymore. You could just hop online and face off against trainers from anywhere. Not like I had friends to big game. Who wrote this script? Come on! The Underground was a fun and unique feature that added a whole new layer to the game. Players could use the Explorer Kit to dive into a network of tunnels beneath Sinnoh. One of the coolest things was that you could connect with friends locally and explore together. A big part of the multiplayer experiences was building secret bases. You could customize these bases with furniture, items, and even set up traps to mess up with anyone who tried to visit. A key activity in the Underground was treasure hunting. You could dig into walls with a hammer and a pickaxe to find hidden items like fossils, evolution stones, and other rare goodies. The digging mechanic, however, was really pretty straightforward. You use the tools to break through the rocks and hope your wall doesn't collapse before you collect everything. This added a fun minigame vibe to it with valuable items as your reward. In Pokemon Platinum and HGSS, the Battle Frontier made a triumphant return after debuting in Pokemon Emerald. This was the ultimate post-game challenge for players looking to push their skills to the limit. Each facility had its own set of rules, which meant you couldn't just rely on the same strategies that got you through the main game. You've got Battle Tower, which is the standard, Battle Factory, which is a rental set, Battle Arcade, which is like a random fun facility where you can choose and get the conditions of battle, and then you got Battle Castle, which is strategy, and then you got Battle Hall, which is specialization in one Pokemon. Each facility challenged you to think differently, adding an element of unpredictability and variety that made the Battle Frontier one of the most beloved features for hardcore players. Pokemon contests were introduced in Generation 3, but in Generation 4 they got an upgrade. Regular contests is no longer a thing, they are now super contests. These weren't just about showing off how cool or cute your Pokemon was anymore. They involved a little bit more skill. This added a fun little diversion from the main quest, especially if you wanted to see your favorite Pokemon dance here, dance there, and shine in a different way basically. In HGSS, one of the coolest new features was the Pokeathlon, a series of mini-games that let your Pokemon compete in athletic events. It was kind of like Pokemon meets the Olympics, with your Pokemon taking part in events like running, jumping, and throwing. Each event tested different stats of your Pokemon, which added a whole new layer to how you selected and trained your team. Pokemon that might not have been great battlers could suddenly shine here, adding some depth to how you view your roster. Looking back, it's no surprise that Generation 4 is often hailed as one of the most important and beloved generation in the Pokemon series. It laid the blueprints for modern Pokemon games and expanded the scope of what the franchise could be, both for casual and competitive players alike. If Gen 3 introduced double battles, Gen 5 took it to the next level by bringing in triple battles and rotation battles. Rotation battles were a fun new shake-up to the singles format as it retained the singles 1v1 logic. Except when you rotate your Pokemon out, you can attack with that same Pokemon on the same turn. It was a fun and interesting format for sure, but a lot of players just felt like it was just another variation of single battles, and I don't really blame them. They weren't really too enticed. Triple battles, however, was a different story. In triple battles, all three Pokemon are out on the field at the same time, but their positions actually mattered. Pokemon in the center could hit any targets, while the other ones on the side can only reach the Pokemon directly across or adjacent to them. This opened up a ton of strategic possibilities where you had to think about who to place where and how to maximize coverage while protecting your valuable teammates. While these formats didn't completely take over the competitive scene, double battles still reign supreme of course, they added a fun twist to the in-game experience. It was a fresh way to challenge players' strategy beyond the typical one-on-one fights. Gen 5 didn't have a traditional battle frontier like Emerald or Platinum, but it did introduce the Battle Subway, essentially a more streamlined battle facility which was based off of the subway system because Unova is based in New York. It offered players several different battle formats such as single, double, as well as the newly introduced multi-battle. Multi-battle format allowed you to team up with a friend or an NPC to take on pairs of opponents. This mode added a cooperative element to the typical subway battles, letting you strategize alongside a partner. But if trains aren't your thing, the Pokemon World Tournament introduced in Black 2 and White 2 was an absolute treasure trove of content for long-time fans of the series. I dare say this is actually my favorite content from the entire game series itself. It took the concept of battling gym leaders, champions, and other top-tier trainers from previous generations and turned it into a full-on tournament format that was both challenging and incredibly fun. For many players, PWT was the standout feature of Black and White 2, combining fan service, competitive challenge, replayability, all into one unforgettable battle facility. The biggest selling point of it was that it didn't just bring back the current generation's gym leaders and champions, it brought everyone back. I mean, it is the World Tournament after all. This was a dream come true for longtime fans who had grown up battling these iconic characters in older games. Not only did they bring their signature Pokemon, but their teams were competitive, sporting high levels and solid strategies, unlike the earlier games where gym leaders were just pushovers. You could even battle every champions of every region, including Red, Blue, Lance, Cynthia, and Steven, all in one place. Honestly, Cynthia still makes me shit my pants when her team starts playing. Hidden Grottos in Black and White 2 were an incredibly fun and rewarding mechanic for players who love searching for rare Pokemon. Scattered throughout the Unova region, these small secret areas provided an opportunity to find Pokemon with hidden abilities, rare items, and even items like evolutionary stones. Did I mention that you could find Pokemon with hidden abilities? Hidden Grottos had a randomized chance of containing either an item or a Pokemon, which reset after a certain period of time, which was usually about 256 steps. This really made it feel like you were going on a treasure hunt every time you visited the grotto. One of these really cool features that Generation 5 introduced that wasn't a battle mechanic was a world-building gimmick: seasons. For the first time in a Pokemon game, the world will change based on the in-game months, cycling through spring, summer, fall, and winter. This wasn't just a visual change either. Certain areas of the game could only be accessed during specific seasons, and some Pokemon would appear more frequently depending on the season. This added a sense of dynamism to the world and made exploration feel more immersive. Generation 5 also brought a huge new feature that would become essential to competitive play: hidden abilities. Introduced through the Dream World, initially named as Dream World abilities, were alternate abilities that certain Pokemon could have, often making them far more viable in battle than they were before. Players could access the Dream World through an online platform, but it has unfortunately been discontinued since. In this space, you could play minigames and find Pokemon with these special hidden abilities, then transfer them to your game. For example, Pokemon like Gliscor, which previously wasn't too special, became a monster in battle with the Poison Heal ability, which made it heal instead of taking damage from poison. Some Pokemon got a complete upgrade thanks to these abilities, like Blaziken, who was probably banned after he got a speed boost, as well as Politoed, who received Drizzle, allowed it to destroy the metagame with Rain. For those who wanted a break from the competitive grind, Pokestar Studios was Gen 5's light-hearted side activity. Located in Black White 2, Pokestar Studios let you and your Pokemon star in movies by following scripted battles. What made Pokestar Studios interesting was that you could unlock multiple endings for each movie, depending on how well you followed the script or intentionally ignored it. Some players would even try to sabotage the movie on purpose just to see what kind of wacky results they could get. While not everyone loved Pokestar Studios, it was a fun side quest for people who wanted to explore another side of the Pokemon world. Generation 5 wasn't afraid to take risks, and it paid off. Even though some features like the Dream World are no longer accessible, the impact they had on competitive Pokemon and the world building in Unova still resonate with players today. So Game Freak, when are we getting our Gen 5 remakes? Generation 6 of Pokemon with Pokemon X and Y, and later Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, was a groundbreaking era for the franchise. It was the first set of games on the Nintendo 3DS, bringing a huge leap forward in graphics, mechanics, and even how battles looked and felt. But just like every generation before it, Generation 6 wasn't just about better visuals, it also introduced some wild new gimmicks. When people think of X and Y, or S, the first thing that usually comes to mind is Mega Evolution. This mechanic allows certain Pokemon to temporarily evolve into a more powerful form during battle, giving him stat boosts, new abilities, and sometimes even a different type. Mega Evolution wasn't permanent. Your Pokemon would revert to its original form after the battle ended. But during that one battle, your Pokemon could become an absolute powerhouse. It required a special item called the Megastone, which was specific to each Pokemon, like Charizardite for Charizard and Lucarionite for Lucario. Most importantly, you could only Mega Evolve one Pokemon per battle, so choosing which one to Mega Evolve became a key part of your strategy. Some Pokemon like Mega Kangaskhan became nearly unstoppable in battle, and others like Mega Charizard X and Y had two forms to choose from, each with a different role. Obviously, favoritism doesn't exist among Pokemon. Players not only had to choose which Pokemon to Mega Evolve, but also when to do it in battle. Holding off too long could mean losing the opportunity to use their power, but jumping the gun too soon could backfire. Mega Evolution was a huge hit. It gave underused Pokemons like Beedrill and Sableye a new chance to shine, as well as Pokemons like Flygon. No, seriously though, why did my boy Flygon get Mega Evolution became one of the most beloved mechanics in the series, so much so that when Gen 7 rolled around and introduced Z moves, many fans, including me, still preferred the Mega Evolution mechanic. And of course, the introduction of the Fairy type in Generation 6 was one of the most impactful changes in the Pokemon franchise. Up until then, Dragon-type Pokemon had reigned supreme in competitive battles due to their high stats and strong offensive capabilities. There were very few counters to the Dragon types as no Pokemon type resisted it. As a result, Dragon types dominated without balance. Fairy-type Pokemon, however, were specifically introduced to counter this imbalance. With their super effective attacks against Dragon-type and complete immunity to Dragon-type moves, Fairy-types immediately became a game-changer. Additionally, Fairy-types were strong against Dark and Fighting-type Pokemon as well, which further enhanced their utility. Powerful Dark-type Pokemon such as Tyranitar and Hydreigon had to deal with the sudden rise of powerful Fairy-type attackers, while Fighting-type staples like Conkeldurr had to navigate around Fairy-type resistance to Fighting-type moves. With the Fairy-type, Steel-type and Poison-type Pokemon, which were previously less commonly used, found a new purpose. Pokemon like Mega Mawile and Mega Aggron became popular counters to Fairy-types, leveraging their Steel-type's resistance and powerful moves. Poison types like Mega Venusaur and Amoonguss also saw increased usage for their ability to threaten Fairy types with super effective Poison type moves. This shift introduced by Fairy type Pokemon in Generation 6 helped make the overall battling experience more balanced, diverse, and strategic. Generation 6 wasn't afraid to try new things, and of course, new things they tried. Sky battles, inverse battles, and horde encounters were some of the new additions into Generation 6. Sky Battle, as the name suggests, were only battles that could be fought by Pokemon that were flying type or had the ability Levitate. These battles were visually really cool, but they were really extremely limited. The pool of available Pokemon were relatively small, and the lack of move diversities makes Sky Battle more of a novelty than a viable challenge. While they were a cool idea, they didn't leave a lasting impact on the series and were dropped in later games. One of the more under the radar but extremely interesting gimmicks introduced in Generation 6 was the Inverse Battle format. In this battle style, type matchups were completely flipped. Super effective moves become not very effective, and normally weak moves turn into devastating powerhouses. This sounds like such a fun and interesting way to play Pokemon, but there was only one trainer in Generation 6 who engaged in the inverse battle mechanics, which was Pokemon Trainer Inver. Honestly, Game Freak, you kinda missed out on this. Inverse battles are super cool. Horde encounters, on the other hand, were something else entirely. In a Horde encounter, you'd face 5 wild Pokemon at once, with one of your Pokemon out in battle. This was a fun and interesting twist on the traditional wild encounter and made for some seriously intense battles, especially if you were caught off guard by a high-level Horde. Horde encounters were also a huge boon for EV training. If you knew how to manipulate the Horde spawns, like using moves with Sweet Sense, you could fight specific Hordes to quickly boost your Pokemon's EV. For example, fighting a Horde of Galpin was perfect for maxing out your HP EVs, making this a super efficient way to train competitive teams. While Sky and Inverse battles were more of a flashy gimmick, Horde encounters became a valuable part of team building, especially for competitive players looking to optimize their training. Speaking of training, Gen 6 gave us super training. a mechanic that made it much easier to manage and track a Pokemon's effort values. Super Training was a series of minigames where you use your Pokemon to shoot soccer balls at targets, earning points that translated into EVs. It was a nice, low-stress way to train Pokemon without needing to grind in wild battles. While not as flashy as Mega Evolution, Super Training was a huge quality of life improvement for anyone serious about battling, and it made competitive Pokemon much more accessible to players who might have been intimidated by the hidden mechanics of previous generations. While X and Y introduced Mega Evolution, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire took that concept even further with Primal Reversion. Primal Reversion was basically a Mega Evolution-like mechanic but exclusive to Groudon and Kyogre, returning them to their primal, more powerful forms. Primal Groudon gained the Fire typing in addition to its Ground type, as well as the ability Desolate Land, which created harsh sunlight that prevented any Water type moves from working. Primal Kyogre, on the other hand, kept its Water typing, but gained the ability Primordial Sea, which summoned Heavy Rain that negated all Fire type moves. Primal Reversion added a new twist to legendary Pokemon battles, and it was a big part of the story in ORAS, showing just how powerful these ancient Pokemon could be. Lastly, the Friend Safari introduced in X and Y was one of the most exciting and unique ways to catch Pokemon in Generation 6. It brought multiplayer into the Pokemon catching experience in a fresh way, making connecting with friends more rewarding than ever. After you added someone as a friend on your 3DS, their friend code would unlock a specific type of Safari in your game, and each Friend Safari had a specific set of Pokemon tied to it. Pokemon found inside the Friend Safari had a chance of having their hidden abilities, making it an incredible resource for competitive players who were hunting for the perfect team. Generation 6 pushed Pokemon into the modern era with its leaps in visuals, but it didn't stop there. Mega Evolution became one of the most beloved battle mechanics in the franchise, while features like Super Training and the Friend Safari made both competitive and casual play much more accessible than ever. Instead of sticking to the tried and true formula, Generation 7 of Pokemon, which includes Pokemon Sun, Moon, and their Ultra versions, shook things up in almost every aspect. Gyms? What's that? We've got Trial Captains and Kahunas, baby! Set in the tropical Alola region, this generation introduced some major gameplay changes that offered a fresh experience for both casual and hardcore fans. After the introduction of Mega Evolutions in Generation 6, Generation 7 brought in another flashy mechanic in the form of Z moves. While Mega Evolution focused on powering up one specific Pokemon, Z moves allowed any Pokemon to unleash a super-powered once per battle attack, provided of course they were holding the corresponding Z crystal and you do the dance correctly. Z moves were basically over-the-top ultra-powerful versions of regular moves. Every type got its own generic Z moves like Bloom Doom or Inferno Overdrive, but there were also some signature Z moves for certain Pokemon that were truly devastating. For example, Pikachu's Isenmanboto and Snorlax's Pulverizing Pancake had their own unique animations and immense power. While Z moves were definitely flashy and fun, they didn't have the lasting impact of Mega Evolutions. After Generation 7, Z moves didn't stick around, but for the longest time they were a game changer. One of the most notable changes in Generation 7 was the absence of traditional gyms. Instead of challenging gym leaders, you faced totem Pokemons and participated in island trials. This shift was a big departure from the gym and badge system that had been in place since Generation 1, and it gave Generation 7 its own distinct flavor. Totem Pokemons were basically super-powered version of regular Pokemon, but with a twist. They were much larger, had boosted stats, and could call in ally Pokemon to assist them during battle. These double or even triple battles made for some tense moments, especially when the Totem Pokemon had perfect synergy with their allies. Generation 7 didn't introduce tons of brand new Pokemon, but it did do something that fans definitely loved. It gave us Alolan forms of classic Pokemon. These were region-specific versions of old favorites, with new designs, types, and abilities. It wasn't just a visual redesign, these Alolan forms often changed how these Pokemons were used in battles. Some of the most interesting Alolan forms completely changed the original type combinations. One of my personal favorites are the Alolan Vulpix and the Ninetales line. Alolan Vulpix and Ninetales turn into Ice and Fairy types, which totally flipped the original Fire type moveset on its head. On top of that, their abilities also mirror their Cantonian line, as Alolan Ninetales gets Snow Warning while Cantonian Ninetales gets Drought. Alolan forms were a perfect mix of nostalgia and innovation, breathing new life into classic Pokemon while paying homage to the original designs. It became a trend that fans loved so much that it led to the eventual introduction of Galarian forms and Paldean forms in the future generations. One of the more unique battle formats introduced in Generation 7 was the Battle Royale. This was a 4-player free-for-all where every trainer used 3 Pokemon, and the battle ended when one trainer lost all their Pokemon. The winner was determined by who knocked out the most Pokemon and who had the most left standing when the match ended. Battle Royale was chaotic and unpredictable. You could be targeting an opponent's weakened Pokemon only for another player to knock it out first, stealing the KO and leaving you exposed. On top of that, since the match ended as soon as one player was knocked out, it forced players to be a lot more aggressive without leaving themselves vulnerable. It was an insane mode, as I remember countless nights with my friends screaming at the top of our lungs on Skype because of the endless chaos and betrayal this game mode presented. Generation 7 also introduced one of the most unique and otherworldly gimmicks in the franchise: Ultra Beast. These mysterious alien-like Pokemon came from another dimension via Ultra Wormholes, and they had some of the wildest designs and stats in the series. Ultra Beasts weren't like regular Pokemon. They were more like extra-dimensional creatures with bizarre appearance and unusual stat distributions. Pokemon like Nihilego, Buzzwole, and Katana had incredibly high stats in specific areas but glaring weakness in others. For example, Katana had sky-high attack but abysmal special defense. In Ultra Sun and Moon, players could ride on the back of Solgaleo or Lunala, depending on which version of the game you've got, and travel through Ultra Wormholes to different dimensions where they could catch Ultra Beasts. These Ultra Wormholes were basically minigames, but they added a fun and unique twist to catching these powerful creatures. Generation 7 was all about shaking up the formula and introducing new ideas that made Pokemon feel fresh again. In many ways, Generation 7 was a bridge between the traditional Pokemon gameplay we all know and the bold experimentation that followed in Generation 8. In case you guys didn't know, Generation 7 was also the introduction of the most egregious Pokemon in VGC history, Incineroar. With the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield for the Nintendo Switch, Generation 8 brought a lot of changes to the Pokemon series. It was the first mainline game to fully embrace home consoles, bringing the series to a much larger screen. Generation 8 also introduced new mechanics and some features that were definitely controversial. The literal biggest gimmick of Gen 8 was Dynamaxing. When Game Freak heard that the player base wanted Mega Evolution on every Pokemon, they thought, let's do that, then make them super big as well. This mechanic allowed your Pokemon to grow to massive sizes during battle, gaining a significant boost in HP and access to powerful max moves for 3 turns. Max move had added effects like Max Knuckle boosting attack or Max Airstream increasing speed. It was the defining battle feature of Sword and Shield and fundamentally changed how battles played out, to the point that it even got banned in Smogon's metagame at the time. Any Pokemon could Dynamax, with only a select few who could Gigantamax, growing to a skyscraper-like size and getting a temporary stat buff. Some Pokemon had special Gigantamax forms, which not only changed the Pokemon's appearance but also gave them exclusive max moves. For example, Gigantamax Charizard had G-Max Wildfire, and Gigantamax Pikachu, yes, that's a thing, Gigantamax Pikachu had G-Max Volt Crash, which paralyzed all opponents. While some players loved the spectacle, others felt it skilled battles too heavily in favor of whoever managed to time their Dynamax better. Regardless, it made Gen 8's battles stand out. Max Raid Battle, where you fought alongside 3 other players, be it NPC or your online friends, became a fan favorite feature because they offer something that Pokemon games haven't focused on before: cooperative multiplayer. This time, it wasn't just about trading or battling against your friends. Now you were teaming up with them to take down huge, tough bosses. And plus, the rewards made it feel really satisfying. The wild area was the first time Pokemon really experimented with open world design, allowing players to freely explore a large open space filled with wild Pokemon, changing weather, and dynamic events like max raid battles. Unlike the Route of Old, where Pokemon only appeared in the grass, the wild area had Pokemon roaming around in the overworld. You can see giant Pokemon like Steelix or Machamp wandering around, and they vary depending on the weather and time of day. This gave the wild area a dynamic and alive feeling that hadn't been present in previous games. It also kinda nullified the value of Repel since they don't repel Pokemon anymore. The weather in the wild area changed daily, and different weather conditions would cause different Pokemon to appear. For example, you might find Pelipper or Mantine in rainy weather, while Tyranitar could show up during sandstorms. This kept the wild area fresh and encouraged players to revisit it often to see what new Pokemons might have showed up. The wild area, in fact, was a big step towards a fully open world design that will come in Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet. I would love to discuss about Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is arguably my favorite Pokemon game released on the Nintendo Switch, but it's not a mainline game, so I'll hold my thoughts back for now. Something that I wasn't particularly a fan of was the introduction of DLC expansions in the series. I guess yeah, Game Freak has gotta get that back, but $90 for the main game and the DLCs? Anyway, moving along, both the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra expansions built on the wild area concept, adding new regions to explore, new Pokemon to catch, and new battle challenges to conquer. The Isle of Armor introduced a large new area filled with wild Pokemon, new items, and a dojo where you train with Mustard, the former champion of Galar. It also gave players the chance to raise Kubfu, a legendary Pokemon, and evolve it into Urshifu through a series of trials. You know. One of the coolest features was the restricted sparring where you could battle with type-restricted teams, adding a layer of difficulty for experienced players. On the other hand, the Crown Tundra focused on exploration and legendary Pokemon. Players could participate in Dynamax Adventures, which were an extended version of Max Raid battles, and catch legendaries from previous generations. The Galarian Star Tournament was introduced here as well, where you could team up with iconic traders from the Galar region and battle through a bracket of tough opponents. This was a fun way to test your skills in a different format and enjoy some fan-favorite characters. Just like Alolan forms in Generation 7, Galarian forms gave classic Pokemon a fresh coat of paint with new designs, new types, and new abilities. Pokemon like Galarian Weezing, which is now a Poison Fairy type, or Galarian Zigzagoon, which evolved into Obstagoon, which was a new Dark Normal type evolution, completely changed how these Pokemon were used in battle. These region-specific forms were not only a nostalgic callback, but they also came with new abilities that shook up competitive play, like Neutralizing Gas, which disabled all abilities while Galarian Weezing was on the field. Just like in Generation 7, these region-specific forms were a fun way to reintroduce older Pokemon to a new audience while also adding strategic depth to the game. The introduction of Dynamax in Generation 8 shook up Pokemon battles in a huge way. These mechanics quickly became a bit too powerful for the competitive singles metagame, resulting in Dynamax being the first ever gimmick to be banned from competitive singles. While they were still a staple in official tournaments like VGC, their ban was a huge moment for the singles player base, as it was clear that these mechanics were starting to become a little unbalanced for the singles metagame. Finally, we get to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where Terrestrialization takes center stage. This new gimmick allows Pokemon to take on a shiny crystalline form that boosts their stats and can even change their type mid-battle. Imagine turning your Pikachu into a flying type and catching your opponent off guard. There are so many strategic possibilities. Each Pokemon has a Terra type which can be the same as one of its original types or something completely different. When you Terrestrialize, your Pokemon takes on that Terra type and gets a major power boost for any move that matches that type. If the Terra type matches one of your Pokemon's existing types, the boost stacks with Stab, making moves hit even harder. Terrestrialization adds a massive element of unpredictability to battles. Outside of Terrestrialization, one of the most defining features of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the fully open world structure. Unlike previous games where players followed a set path through routes and towns, Generation 9 gives you the freedom to explore the Paldea region however you like. Whether you want to hunt for rare Pokemon, take on gym leaders, or just roam the wilderness, the game lets you set your own pace. For the first time ever, you can tackle gym leaders in any order you want. Sure, some gyms might have stronger trainers than others, but the game doesn't stop you from exploring the world in any direction. Which, in hindsight, was a huge lapse in decision making from Game Freak. They could have made the challenges and Pokemon levels scale with your progression, but I digress. This flexibility makes each playthrough unique as there's no fixed path you have to follow. Generation 9 also gives player the option to pursue multiple storylines simultaneously. The first one being the Victory Road, which is the classic gym leader path. Then you've got the Path of Legends, where you are focused on finding and battling giant Titan Pokemon. And then you've got the last one, which is Starfall Street, where you take down Team Star, the game's villainous team. The open world format makes these storylines feel more integrated, allowing players to jump between them at their own pace, making the world more dynamic and alive. Curiously, in Gen 9, TMs are once again non-permanent like before Gen 5, which allowed them to introduce the TM crafting machine, a new way to create technical machines using in-game resources. TMs have been around forever, but crafting them is new and allows for far more flexibility in move selection. Instead of being limited by the number of TMs you find or having to traverse the entire universe just to find one flamethrower TM, you can create as many as you need as long as you have the materials. This encourages players to engage more with the game's open world, since the materials required to craft TMs are dropped by wild Pokemon after battle. One feature that Gen 9 introduced that I personally really enjoyed was the multiplayer co-op feature. Multiplayer co-op allows up to 4 players to roam the open world together, catch Pokemon and battle trainers all in the same session. Look at how far we've come. From the days where multiplayer meant you had to be physically in the room with another player, now your adventure can be fully shared with others thousands of miles away. This feature makes Generation 9 feel more connected than ever, blending the single player adventure with social, cooperative elements that give players even more ways to enjoy the game. Of course, what would a new gen Pokemon game be if we didn't have DLC? Following the success of the Crown Tundra and the Isle of Armor, Generation 9 continued to expand with the introduction of the Hidden Treasure of Area Zero DLC, divided into 2 parts. The first is Teal Mask, where you explore the region of Kitakami with addition of new characters, new legendary Pokemons like Ogerpon, and fun minigames like Ogre Ousting. And the second one was the Indigo Disc DLC, which was focused on Blueberry Academy, and it was a lot more challenge-based with new battle formats and an even tougher set of opponents. It also brought back several Pokemon that weren't in the base game, adding to the roster and giving players more team-building options. The DLCs kept players engaged long after completing the main game, offering fresh content, new challenges, and a chance to dive deeper into the lore of the Paldea region. Every generation of Pokemon brings something new to the table, whether it's a fresh battle gimmick or an exciting new facility to test your skills. The journey from Kanto to Paldea shows that the heart of Pokemon lies in its exploration, its strategy, and a love for discovery. It is a timeless thing, and with each generation expanding its potential in exciting new ways. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end. If you guys like this video, I have another video here that discusses about water types and how they perform throughout the different generations. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!